Friends, my name is Gary Allen. I want to welcome you to this edition of Framing the Future, a webinar series sponsored by the Maryland Forestry Foundation, in which we try to look at issues that will frame decision making about the landscape which you and I share, particularly its forest cover in the years ahead. Today, we're blessed with a very special program talking about landowner assistance. It's the Foundation's largest and most successful program. And to provide that, we've enlisted a very excellent panel, which will be introduced to you in just a moment. I want to remind all of you that the program is being recorded and will be available within the coming week on the Foundation's website, marylandforestryfoundation.org, for any of you who may have missed or want to see some of the details of today's program again. With that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to our series moderator, Megan Carr, a urban forester in the city of Baltimore and one of our first Mel Fellows. Megan?
All right, thank you, Gary. A couple quick housekeeping notes for our audience members as we get started. We welcome your questions. We have about 10 to 15 minutes set aside for discussion at the end of the hour. So please, if you have questions that come up during today's discussion, feel free to enter those at any time in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen, and we will read those aloud and have our panelists answer them for you on camera at the end of today's session. Again, if you are interested in viewing future webinars, you can also go to the Maryland Forestry Foundation webinar website, navigate to webinars up at the top of your screen, go to the webinars page, and you can get signed on for announcements and get notified of each month's topic and get sent a link to register for each of our upcoming sessions. So with no further ado, we will welcome our panelists. So first up today, we're going to be hearing from Craig Highfield. Craig is the Forests Program Director for the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. The mission of the Forest Program is to pursue innovative strategies and collaborations that improve the health of the region's forests, resource management, and trees to private landowners, decision makers, and the general population of the six-state Bay watershed. Craig leads the forest team that is situated in the Alliance's state offices in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. So with that, Craig, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Well, welcome. Thanks everyone for attending. Going to talk to you today about one of our programs, a reforestation program in Maryland. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. All right. Can everyone see that? Or
Looks good.
See that? All right. Sounds good. All right. So today I'm going to talk to you about Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters. It's a program that we started with Maryland Forestry Foundation, so Gary, and Maryland Forest Service way back in 2014. So kind of get into some of the history and how the program works. And then Anna's going to talk about kind of the partnership we have with Maryland Forest Service on this program. So just a little bit about us, the Alliance. I don't know if you've heard of us. We're not the Bay Foundation. We're the Alliance for the Chesapeake. Different mission. We try to bring people together. We try to collaborate on everything we do. So any project we try to undertake, we look for great partners. And we have some great partners in this program as well. Within our pillars of work at the Alliance, I'm the director of our forest team, but we also have an agriculture team, green infrastructure, and stewardship and engagement. But just like anything, we end up all working together on various projects. The forest program team mission really is resource building and engagement. So it's just emphasizing the importance of forests on our landscapes for a variety of reasons. So to the general public, to woodland owners, to farmers, whatever, it's the importance of forests and an active forest management. We do reforestation, so both riparian forests and upland forests, trying to get new forests on the ground. And then we promote forest management. So that's active management of our public and private forests. So keep our working forests working. So healthy forests, healthy waters. We started this in 2014. just as a way to try to get more forests on our landscape. So, since the mid part of this last century, we're losing forests drastically as the population of the Bay watershed increased. At one point, we were losing 100 acres a day in the Bay watershed. So there's no other land use better for water quality than forests. Chesapeake Bay watershed at one time was 95% forested. And the bay actually grew up around a watershed that was forested. So, thinking of ways to try to increase forests in the Bay watershed, we just had to look at a variety of programs. And since they do such a great job at reducing the pollution in our waterways, mainly nutrients and sediment, we were able to look to programs that funded projects to do this. Maryland Forestry Foundation and Maryland Forest Service, we got together and started thinking about this grant program through DNR, the Chesapeake and Coastal Bays Trust Fund, which every year runs a grant program for projects to support projects that reduce nutrient sediments. So we had that. We had projects. We wanted to do reforestation. The kind of the challenge with us, though, is compared to doing a stream restoration project or a wetland project, we were proposing to do reforestation throughout Maryland. So, smaller projects, multiple parcels. So we kind of had to think about how could we get our projects together, submit. It's not like we could have gone to the grant program and say, give us money for reforestation. We want to do that. We actually, with this program, have to submit programs ahead of time. So, it's a matter of working with landowners ahead of time, getting them interested in reforestation, and then submitting a project to there. So we're kind of combining all these projects to do that. And so this is why working with Maryland Forest Service is so essential in this program. So way back in 2014, how this started with Maryland Forestry Foundation and the Alliance is, we recognize that Maryland Forest Service works with thousands of landowners throughout Maryland. They have offices in every county in Maryland, and they're working on, existing forests, writing forest management plans. So our initial goal, and Gary remembers this, is we're like, why not look through these forest stewardship plans and see where landowners had wanted to plant trees, maybe in some open parts of their land. Those are landowners who are already vested in their forests, understand forestry, and maybe there's an opportunity to add more forest to their property. And so that's really how it started, is working through forest stewardship plans and finding landowners who were interested that way. But quickly since that time, kind of word got out about this program, because what we tried to do is make it very easy to use and very flexible. Okay, there are existing programs out there through, the USDA or even through the state for reforestation, but it can be cumbersome. What we wanted to try to do is reforest Maryland's lands with Maryland landowners and make it as easy as possible. So one thing we recognize is this had to be turnkey. We had to have a project where we were going to establish the forest for people rather than just reimburse them for them trying to plant trees on their property or reforest their property, or having them to go out and find consultants or natural resources consultants to be able to do this. We were just going to do them for them. And it didn't cost them money. This is a free program for landowners. And it's not a give out. It's not a kind of this freebie stuff. They're giving us the opportunity to reduce nutrient and sediments on their property. So they're availing their land to us. So we wanted to make this free as well. We're establishing new forests on their property. But we do have requirements. We work with landowners. We make them understand that they do have to keep the forest on their property for a minimum of 15 years. So that's important. It's an agreement we have. So if they're not willing to do that, then we're not willing to do a project with them. So they have to agree to this. It's a very simple one-page landowner agreement. They understand after 3 years, it's up to them to steward their project into the future. It becomes their project after that. So we're trying to create something very easy to do, but something that was professionally done. So turnkey, we handle everything, the planting, and then the 3 years of maintenance, which we'll get into in a second. So here's kind of an example of a project. We submit projects to the trust fund. Once we're awarded funding, Maryland Forest Service will go out, meet again with the landowners that had showed interest in the project, and they develop a planting plan. So a planting plan is just matching what their land can provide, so your soils, the position of that forest, with what the landowners want, type of trees they might want on their property, and making sure everything is a right fit. So they're generating a map for us and a planting plan. So within the planting plan, kind of lists the landowner's goals, why they want the forest. And people want forests for a variety of reasons, whether it's to improve wildlife, whether it's just for privacy, to increase privacy, or to eventually have a hardwood forest or some type of forest in a few generations to be able to harvest. So investing in the future. Then it's matching the trees that'll do well on that property that also meets the landowner's goals. So coming up with a list of that. And then it lists out kind of the maintenance instructions. What's going to happen after those trees are planted by the natural resources contractor? Who's going to take care of them, what that's going to entail to get those trees established and growing. And so usually at this point in the fall, after the planting plans are all developed, we get them all together. We put them together and we put them out for bid to natural resources contractors throughout Maryland. We generally break it down by region: central, western, southern, and eastern projects. Put them out to bid, write down the specifications, and we're looking for quality contractors who can provide this service according to our specifications. We usually get the bids back, then make our decisions, put them on contract, and get ready for the planting season. Most of the trees that we order, or Maryland Forest Services orders, is from the state tree nursery over in Preston, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore. Maryland's quite fortunate that we have a state maintained tree nursery, which is great, always supplying us with a supply of bare root seedlings. So these are small things that we're using, small trees for reforestation. We also use other private nurseries, when the state nursery runs out of certain species that the landowner might want. And then it's begin to planting. So usually our planting window, there's 2 planting windows that we have in Maryland to reforest. And that's in the spring. It's usually March through the end of April, so 2 months there. And then we're planting more in the fall as well. Mainly in central region, southern, eastern. Sometimes the western region gets a little too cold in the fall to plant, but we've done some in the western region. And that's usually after Thanksgiving, through December until the ground starts to freeze. So at that point, we have to get the sites prepared. Not all sites will need this. Some are lawn, some are just pasture where it just might need a mowing. But we want to make sure these trees succeed. So a lot of times site prep is essential. It's required. So we can build that into our budget, our ask. And, here's a case here where we need just to bring a bush hog in, knock things down, have a contractor do that to get it ready for planting. So the contractors come through in those 2 planting windows and they work very, very, very hard. Most are using, visa workers that come in just for part of the year to tree plant. They have vast experience at this. And they do a fantastic job. They're the hardest workers I've ever seen. So we kind of lay this out. So this is not a tree planting, it's a reforestation. So it does seem odd. We typically plant in perfect rows. We're planting down the rows, and sometimes landowners are taken aback on this because they see it and they're like, oh, doesn't look like a forest. It's rows. And I'll kind of show you, they're laying it out in rows. But what we're doing, why we do this is we need to provide maintenance to that. So mowing and spot spraying, and I'll get into that in a second. And to do that, they need to be in rows in order to get a mower through there. If not, then it's too difficult. Maintenance doesn't happen, and we don't want the projects to fail. Eventually, trees die, and some survive and take over, new trees blow in or seed blows in, and eventually it'll look like a natural forest. But the first few 3 years, sometimes landowners have a tough time with that. But we're not planting trees, we're reforesting. So all of our trees are protected with 5-foot shutters. And you may see this around on plantings. This is not the thing sometimes the landowners aren't ready for. We do a lot of prep talk about what it's going to look like. But in Maryland, you can't plant trees without the use of tree shelters. I wish you could, but deer are too voracious. We have an overpopulation of deer. And if you do that, you're just feeding deer. If you don't use shelters, you're just feeding deer. So it's something, it's like a little greenhouse you're putting on those trees to get them established, growing enough so they grow out of the brows of deer. They grow at a height so the crown is safe from being browsed. So it's a few years they do have to stay on. But they, you can see how they're setting it in rows. Everything's with an oak stake, setting it up for maintenance. So it does look like rows. It almost looks like tombstones, but it is essential to start to look a little bit more natural. And then the key part, and this is what's so great about, I think, the DNR Trust Funds program, is it allows us to provide maintenance. For the longest time before we did this grant program, a lot of grantors would not fund maintenance, the aftercare of taking care of those trees. And I think we had a lot of projects that just failed because, the maintenance wasn't happening. So in those first couple of years, there's a lot of competition for resources that the trees are doing. It's mainly the other vegetation. So what we try to do is reduce the vegetation competition, water and nutrients for those trees to get our trees established above that time. So that requires mowing and spot spray herbicide. Well, I'll get into that in a second, but the mowing first, we're just mowing down the rows twice a year, twice during the growth season. Usually it's June and then maybe August, September. Just come down there. You're knocking the trees back. You're not mowing every day or every week or so. It's not looking like a golf course. You're just kind of mowing. You can see this, a 3-year-old project. You're still just mowing to knock the competition down. You leave the grass between, or the vegetation between the rows high. A lot of times you get new trees growing into that area as well. And then the spot spray herbicide. Now, herbicide gets a bad rap a lot of times, and understand, but what we use is a systemic herbicide, just spot spray around those trees to kill off the vegetation. It reduces competition of that vegetation, but it also reduces habitat for meadow voles, which can be very detrimental to the tree. They tend to hide in those shelters and girdle trees. But we do this twice a year for 3 years as well. And you can see that kind of the spot spray that we have on that. And we use it lightly. It's not like we're spraying the entire field. And this has been essential for us as well. And this didn't happen the first couple of years, but we noticed landowners weren't doing it. So we just have our contractors do it as well in those first 3 years. Things knock down those shelters, whether it's wind, whether it's deer knocking it down. So twice a year, we also have the contractors straighten any shelter that's down. Because often those shelters, the tree's still living, it's just knocked down. And it'll grow funky if you don't straighten it out, or, it puts it at a point where deer can browse it. So we have them straighten up shelters as well. We used to use tree mats for landowners who really were set against any kind of herbicide, which we understand. But we don't use them anymore. We felt they didn't work. A lot of times vines grow underneath those that you don't see and you can't mow. A lot of times those mats would get caught in the mowers and just rip everything down. We just didn't find, they were a nuisance. So we no longer use those. If the landowner doesn't want herbicide, we just do the mowing. And, a lot of times survival isn't as good, but, as long as you're mowing and reducing competition, it does well. We do use bird nets over the shelters as well. They have become issues, I think, especially on faster growing trees. And a lot of times you put these bird nets on so birds can't fall into the shelters. But if they're not checked regularly, a lot of times the trees get caught in them, and they're deformed. They grow wonky, and they kind of harden out that way. So on a lot of projects, we're opting not to use nets, the bird nets as well. Eventually, these trees get big enough, 3 years of maintenance, landowners then take care of them, but you can see they get tall enough where they're out of kind of that browse line. You know, the roots are already established in there. So they still need occasional mowing, but not as intense as in those first 3 years. This is a project, 3 years of maintenance, and you can see it's doing pretty well. It's starting to become a forest. Same thing here, a couple 3-year-old projects after the fact coming back, doing well. And so the requirements for the program, you know, typically we do an acre. We require at least an acre, especially if we're going to do maintenance to make it worthwhile. But we have no limit on maximum. So, you know, this project on the right in Charles County is 36 acres. So as long as we know ahead of time, request the funding for it, but that's 36-acre new forest. And that's really the key with this program is flexibility. So at the end of the day, it's the forest that we want, but we have flexible ways of doing it. Here's a farm that we worked on in Frederick County, where it's a forest buffer that we put in. We put most of it in with a contractor, but the farmer in an organization he's working for wanted to do a volunteer planting on their farm, and we were able to do that. We used slightly larger trees to make it easier for volunteers. So we did a section that, you know, he could bring out the group he was working with, and we planted it with volunteers, which was nice. Still received all the maintenance and the checks and the shelters and all sorts, but it's a different way of doing it. You know, most of the stuff that we do is on private land, but we do work with various, you know, the flexibility. We work with various types of landowner, like schools. This was a school in Cecil County that had a big campus that they just constantly mowed. They were tired of mowing it. It was getting costly to mow it. So, you know, some of it we just converted back into forest, kept the ball fields, but converted the rest back into forest. Churches has been, you know, a lot of churches have big lawns. This is one in Hartford County that we planted. It was a brand new church, you know, a divided agriculture field. We were able to plant on that. We've planted on state lands before. This is Morgan Run in Carroll County. It's a trout stream. But there were open areas there through the state park system that we're able to come in and reforest as well. This is one of my favorite projects that we've ever done. This is in Westminster, in the city of Westminster in Carroll County, Maryland. This was a old country club golf course that the city inherited. They got, and they were going to convert it into a park, but they had no funding to do very much in it. So there was a lot of potential on that one. And so this was a multi-phase project for us. It's a gem of a park right in the city limits. It's used, but there was a lot of potential to do some reforestation there. So, you know, we worked with them. Maryland Forest Service actually found this project and coordinated this. We were able to get the funding for it. But you can see, you know, we're planting the fairways, which the city had just been maintaining for no apparent reason. But slowly, you know, in 2023, we did about 25 acres. In the winter there in the fall, we did additional 5 acres. And then last year, we did another 25 acres, and this was mainly all buffer stuff. This was the part that we had to do a lot of site prep for as well. There was already existing vegetation. There was a lot of invasive vegetation that we had to control first before planting the remaining parts. So this is a great project. City's pretty psyched about it. Most of the residents are too. You know, this is another flexible project we had. Kind of ran into the supervisor at Jug Bay Wetland Sanctuary, who had all these ag fields that they were no longer supposed to be in ag, but she didn't know what to do with them. But we were able to connect this with reforestation. So we were able to reforest a lot of the fields out there that they were supposed to be done farming. They leased out their property, but this is also a first one where we did a meadow. They really wanted to have a meadow along with their forest. Now, meadows reduce nutrient sediments as well, maybe not as well as forest, but we were able to do that. So we started adding meadows, kind of arsenal that we have. Now, we do require landowners plant forests, but there is a component of that where we can add a meadow as well. So doing that, which we did, and it looked great. This is 17 acres. After 3 years, you know, like any kind of meadow or early successional forest, trees started to grow in it, but they wanted to maintain it as a meadow. So this is a great project. They worked with Maryland Forest Service to burn it. So it was an inexpensive way to actually maintain it. And you know, it happened very quickly. Maryland Forest Service knows what they're doing on this. And then the supervisor just sent, or the superintendent just sent me a picture of it already. This was from this year, how quickly it responded. And they got monarch butterflies in that meadow. And when I talk about flexibility, this is what I love about this program is we can be flexible on what we do. And we've leveraged our program with other programs that exist out there. So you can see on the left, all those folks there with Maryland Forest Service, NRCS, Soil Conservation District, FSA. So this was a project in the Gunpowder watershed north of the reservoir. So this is trout stream up there. That we're able to work two programs kind of at the same time to help out this farmer. So this is an elderly farmer. He didn't want these pastures anymore. He was done. He wanted to convert them into forest, which was tremendous for the trout in that river. So he enrolled in the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, which is a great program that the Farm Service Agency sponsors. It provides a rental payment to him. But the problem is, it didn't cover all the pastures. There was a little bit more over an acre of this 4-acre planting that just wasn't covered by the program. It was too far from the stream, but it was an acre then that would just be pasture. What are you going to do with that? You can't grow anything on that. So we were able to come in and work with all these partners to establish that 1 acre along with the other 3 that he enrolled in CREP. So it was just having that flexibility, to that farmer, it was just reforestation, everything. To us, we were leveraging multiple programs to do it. And then, coming towards the end, this is a new project that we're submitting for. Actually, it's kind of working with Baltimore City on the reservoirs properties there. These reservoirs are providing drinking waters, to millions of people. So there's a lot of land up there. Tornado had come through, ripped a lot of the forest. There was a big section of forest, 50 acres, that was knocked down. The only thing is there now are invasives that are growing. So we've submitted for a project to do reforestation on these big acres for the people who use the reservoir system, and then also to help protect the drinking water for everyone, in the city that are drawing water for that. So over the years, like I said, we've been funded almost every year since 2015. You can see the number of projects, has only increased really. Our number of acres definitely has increased over the years. We just planted our 2025 season. We'll probably plant a few more acres in the fall with the 2025 funds. And we've submitted in December for plantings for this fall and also in the spring. But we haven't heard back. We should probably hear back in about a month. And that's all I have. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Craig. That was a great overview. I'm especially excited to hear about the reservoir project, as I will benefit from that pretty directly. And I'll just remind folks, if you have questions for our speakers, please enter those into the Q&A function. We have 10 to 15 minutes set aside at the end of today's session that we'll be able to have a nice discussion about the topic. And next, we will hear from Anna Twigg. Anna has worked for the Maryland Forest Service since September of 2022. Before that, she completed a service year with the Maryland Conservation Corps, and she holds a Master of Public Administration from Appalachian State University. She also holds certifications including Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professional, Roadside Tree Care Expert, Wildland Firefighting, and more. Anna started with the Maryland Forest Service as a tree planting specialist for Frederick and Washington counties. As a tree planting specialist, Anna worked to locally coordinate the state's 5 Million Trees initiative by connecting tree planting projects with resources and funding through the various programs and partnerships administered by the Maryland Forest Service. This included projects of any size and scope, whether it was a handful of container stock trees at a community gathering spot or several acres of new forest. Anna's role has recently moved to reflect internal changes in the Urban and Community Forestry Division of the Maryland Forest Service. She now works as the Community Forestry Coordinator for Western Maryland, which includes Frederick, Washington, Allegheny, and Garrett counties. So welcome, Anna.
Great. Thank you, Megan. All right, so I'm going to try to share my screen. All right. My gosh, brain fart. I go to slide and then
Do you need to go to view, or I don't use Google Slides quite as much. There we
Oh
go.
my gosh, too much
Looks
time
great.
among the trees, not enough on my technology. I'm getting rusty here. Okay, so hello everybody. I'm Anna Twig. I work for the Maryland Forest Service, and I'm going to be talking about the Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters program today. Craig covered the lion's share of it, so I'm going to try my best not to repeat a lot of what he said. And Craig, again, if I say anything that you want to chime in on, please jump in. So the Maryland Forest Service, we've been around in several different iterations since 1906. So here's just a brief overview of our mission statement. So we basically aim to restore, manage, and protect Maryland's trees, forests, and forested ecosystems to sustain our natural resources and connect people to the land. So we have a lot of different divisions within the Maryland Forest Service. We are an agency within the Department of Natural Resources, but within our agency, we have teams focused on forest stewardship, forest health, wildland firefighting, urban and community forestry, and of course, a big focus of our unit is tree planting. Recently, the state established the 5 Million Trees Initiative through the 2021 Tree Solutions Now Act. It established a statewide goal of planting 5 million trees by the year 2031. And with that came significantly expanded tree planting programs for Marylanders. Whether it's urban and community kind of planting, plantings at a school or a place of worship, planting a tree in your front yard, or if it entails, converting several acres of forest or several acres of field into forest. Just a general overview of what we can plant under 5 million trees. We'll only plant native trees in Maryland. Here in Maryland, we're kind of in a unique spot where we are in the northern range of a lot of southern species and the southern range of a lot of northern species. So we actually have a lot of different native trees here in Maryland, trees and shrubs. And we also focus on voluntary tree planting. So here in Maryland, we actually have a pretty robust selection of legislation and laws, policies, regulations about mandated tree planting. So if developers come in and they cut down X amount of trees, X amount of forest, they're legally required to replant in that area. So under 5 million trees, we focus on voluntary planting. So planting trees just because you want to. Everybody who's attending or anybody who's watching the recording of this webinar, they know the benefits of planting trees. I just wanted to touch on it a little bit. Trees, Craig said it, it's one of the most direct ways that we can help water quality, help the health of our Chesapeake Bay watershed. They also help to combat climate change, especially in urban heat islands. The shade of trees can be really, really helpful. They help with the quality of our habitats through clean air, water quality. They also provide habitat and life for our wildlife. And in urban areas, they can also help enhance aesthetics. They can help reduce energy costs and even increase property values. So why plant native trees over maybe non-native ornamental trees, or I hope nobody's planting invasive trees, but here's why you shouldn't. Native species just have a ton more value when it comes to supporting our local wildlife, supporting biodiversity. So everybody kind of is familiar with how monarch butterflies have a host relationship with milkweed, for example. So that's one example of a host plant and insect relationship. Everybody found out about that, planted a bunch of milkweed, and that's been a beautiful thing. Here in Maryland, for example, our white oak tree, which is our state tree, that's the host plant to over 500 different kinds of insects. Now, you might not like insects in your house or crawling up your arm, but there's no denying that they are the building block of our food webs. Without a lot of our native insects, we wouldn't have our birds that we love to watch, and they're just the building block of our food web. So planting native species is definitely really important for supporting biodiversity around here. So where are we so far in the 5 Million Trees Initiative? We planted over 1 million trees. This isn't just what the state has planted. This, the state can't plant all of this by ourselves. We are relying a lot on public-private partnerships, environmental nonprofits like the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay. But here's how it stands today. You can go on the 5 Million Trees website and kind of dig a bit more into this data if you'd like. I'll give more information on that website later on. All right, so I would have just been remiss to not talk about the 5 Million Trees Initiative, but now I'm going to get into the Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters program. When the Maryland Forest Service connects with landowners or community groups, we kind of play the matchmaker game of talking to the landowner or the group, talking about what they want in terms of tree planting, whether it's a handful of trees and a more landscape style planting, or if it's going to be a true afforestation program like converting open land into forest. So we have a bunch of different tools in our toolbox, which is why I included the little photo of the toolbox. But I will say Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters, for many, many reasons, is one of our sharpest and most flexible, versatile tools that we use. And it's one that we reach for very often. Craig mentioned how flexible the program is, which is wonderful. It also keeps up a lot of the excitement about the tree planting program because the simple sign up process and quick turnaround, just keeps the excitement up. It's voluntary enrollment, so there's no kind of restrictive easement that would go on your property. It's kind of a good faith agreement saying, yes, I want this forest on my property. Yes, I'll agree to keep them for 15 years. The fact that it includes 3 years of maintenance makes it a lot more palatable to landowners as well. And it's pretty customizable based on what the landowner wants. So whether they have, a neighbor they might not like that much and they want a big pine forest next to their house, or if they are hunters, maybe they want trees and shrubs that will produce hard and soft mass to attract critters to their property so they can hunt more. There's a lot of different reasons that people would want trees. So this Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters program is delivered through a partnership between the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay and the Maryland Forest Service. So this table isn't all inclusive. I'm sure I accidentally left a couple things out, but for the most part, the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, or Craig, he is in charge of program management. He reviews projects that comes in. He also heads up the grant application and reporting. He coordinates the contracts with the private companies who actually come and plant the trees and the companies that come and do the follow-up maintenance. He also does a lot more. Craig likes to be out in the field, so he will do a lot of, what the Maryland Forest Service does too, but Craig is one person. And Maryland Forest Service, we have a lot of staff, a lot of regional staff in each county that can help to implement the Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters program. So what we do is we kind of act as the boots on the ground technical providers for Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters, which means that we are the point of contact for the landowners. If a landowner reaches out to me and wants to learn more about the program, I'll set up a site visit for them. I would go out to their property, walk the area that they are thinking about installing a new forest, talk about their objectives, what they want, what they don't want, and then we'd come up with a plan. I would make that planting plan, a map, a proposed species list, send that to the landowner for their initial review. We'd hammer out any of the issues in that initial documentation. Once everything looked good for them, they would sign that voluntary landowner agreement. I would bundle that up, send it to Craig, and they would be enrolled for the next planting season. Day of planting, the Maryland Forest Service oversees implementation. We meet the contractors out there to get the ball rolling on planting. We also oversee any site prep that needs to be done. And if they sign up for the Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters program, we'll also come back and do at least a yearly survival check, sometimes more if the landowner reaches out and has any specific concerns, but we'll go back every year, collect some data on how the trees are doing. And if for any reason outside of the landowner's control, there is poor survival, we can sometimes even offer cost-free replants. So the Maryland Forest Service also manages a bunch of forest stewardship programs, which can be leveraged to help landowners who participate who maybe are outside of that 3-year maintenance contract. Maybe their forest is maturing. They might need a little bit of extra help. The Maryland Forest Service can connect them to those kinds of programs, which I'll touch a little bit on later. So typically how it works is a single landowner will reach out to us and we will plant exclusively on their property. But other times we will be able to kind of make it more of a community coordination. So this is one example of that. We actually had one landowner, landowner A, who's the purple polygon right there. He reached out to me and wanted this portion of his property planted. So I went out to his property. While I was there, he said, my neighbor might be interested in this too. he talked to his neighbor, who's the one with the green polygon, and a couple days later, I went out to that property, landowner B, and met with them and was able to get this property, both properties lined up through the same Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters contract. Now, individually, each of these landowners would have been eligible. I think site A was 1.38 acres and site 2 was 1.28. So they met the acre minimum. But the fact that we were able to get them lined up at the same time and get them lined up in the same maintenance contract just really helped streamline things. But for example, if we say there's 4 neighboring landowners, maybe they all want a contiguous planting, but each can only contribute a 1/4 acre. We could still, be flexible if it's a good fit and accommodate that. We just need at least an acre minimum in sight. It doesn't matter as much to us because it is a really flexible program, whether or not it's on different parcels. As long as all the landowners are on board, we can usually be pretty flexible. So I got this project together. I wrapped it up. I sent it to Craig. And in Craig's expertise and infinite wisdom, he said, this forest is kind of jutting out into cropland. Wouldn't it make sense if this forest actually connected to the existing forest edge that's buffering this stream here? I was like, oh yeah, Craig, that's a good point. Let's reach out to that neighboring landowner, which we did. Funnily enough, Craig was actually working with that same landowner on another part of that farm to plant trees that same spring. And she was over the moon to hear that we were planting on this part of her farm, and she wanted to get lined up as well. So we were able to then get a third landowner on this project and plant 5.33 acres, some of which even included a riparian forest buffer. This dark green patch across the purple polygon, that's also a seasonal stream. So we were able to get that buffered as well. It just didn't show up on our GIS. So this is a really great example of neighborhood coordination. And one other thing I should mention is that in sites 1 and 2 here, they were pretty barren because they had been in agriculture for a very long time. And we were able to get a mix of seeded cover crop put in here to help with erosion just right off the bat. One, to limit the spread of any non-native invasive species like Johnson grass or thistle that totally would have taken over on that bare soil, but also to limit a lot of the erosion going into that creek because I work in the mountains, this was on a slope, and there was a lot of runoff evident. So here's just some examples of the kind of documentation we give to the landowner, the kind of information we give. If you look back on the site, you see that site 1, 2, and 3. For all intents and purposes, for the maintenance contractor, that's one site, but each landowner wanted their own species mix and their own idea of what they're getting on their property. So we broke that up a little bit further and told them what kind of trees they were going to be getting on each site, what kind of spacing they were getting. And then we also, when we're doing this planning, we look at what kind of soils are on the property. We typically use Web Soil Survey, which is managed by the USDA. But this can kind of give us more insight on what species would survive and thrive in the planting area. So sometimes planting areas, it's one big block, but maybe half of it is riparian hydric soil, and that's going to need a completely different mix of species than it would for maybe the upland, upslope species on that same site. All right. So here's another example of kind of doubling up. Craig mentioned using Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters in conjunction with federal programs like the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, or CREP. Here's one that we used, another Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay program in conjunction with Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters. This was the Healthy Streams Farm Stewardship Program. So this landowner, we actually planted at his property back in spring of 2024. Those are the green polygons you see here. And then they were so happy with this planting, they reached out to us and wanted to look into opportunities to plant in their active cow pasture. So cows are curious, and if they see tree tubes, they're going to rub all up on them. They're going to knock them over. So we definitely need fencing to keep cattle and cows away from our tree tubes. And this was definitely a high priority area that we wanted planted because this stream was not super healthy. It's very, it doesn't have any shade, any kind of vegetative buffer. So Craig and we met with the landowners out there we were able to get them lined up with the Healthy Strings Farm Stewardship Program, which gave them a conservation voucher to pay to install brand new cattle exclusion fencing and some crossings on that pasture, hence making that area plantable. So that would have been cost prohibitive for that landowner to pursue on their own, but by stacking up a bunch of different programs with the Alliance, we were able to make it as seamless and as accessible to landowners as we can. So this is just a great example of how we're really trying to make this as easy as possible for landowners, and we want to help. We're here to help. This landowner was so excited about this new buffer that they got that they're actually talking to their neighbor just west of them, that you can see doesn't have any buffer on their stream as well. So word of mouth really goes a long way. I mean, I can sing the praises of these programs all day, but if a farmer hears it from their neighbor who they know and trust, that's going to go way further than anything I could say. So happy landowners are key. There's other ways we can, kind of customize this project based on landowner interest. One of the hot things right now is foraging or food forests, planting your own little foraging patch. There's a lot of native fruit and nut bearing species that humans can eat, but also the wildlife absolutely love them. That picture there is one of a wild American plum. We've done some plantings for people who have bees, they're beekeepers. And so one focus of theirs is to plant species that will flower at different parts of the year, so their bees have a nice local nectar source. So most importantly, we focus on planting the right tree in the right place. It has happened before where landowners really are married to the idea of a specific kind of tree that might not be the best fit for the kind of soil that they have or the amount of light that they have. So we do have to be realistic about how far we can go in customizing projects, but we really do try to accommodate as much as we possibly can. Now, when we're talking about customizing, I think it's important to say this is a afforestation program, not a landscaping program. So while we can say, oh, okay, these first 2 rows are closest to the house, let's do lower growing trees to minimize any maintenance issues down the line or add aesthetics for the first 2 rows that you're going to see. We can't say this tree will be this specific species in this spot. This tree will be this next specific species. It's basically like a randomized planting for the most part. So Craig touched on this, so I'm going to zoom through this, but on planting day, I took this photo at about 8 a.m. They're laying out the lines. The contractors are all laying out the lines. I was working with the crew of about 13 people. Really hard workers. So they lay out the lines and then use those as reference when they're laying out the grid. So typically we plant on a staggered grid. So if you're looking at it from one direction, it does look like really perfect rows. But if you're looking at it from another direction, it tends to look more like a natural forest. And then after that, they prep the ground. They use a modified shovel that they actually get welded specifically for the job at an angle, so that way they can scalp and remove the existing soil and vegetation where they're going to plant the tree. Then they plant the tree using a tool called a hodad. We use bare root seedlings. Sometimes the landowners are a little surprised by how small the trees are, but bare root seedlings do really, really well. Unlike planting container stock trees, our bare roots have the opportunity to grow their roots where they're going to spend the rest of their lives. So they really take off. And then you install the shelters. And our shelters, we use 5-foot tubes for the most part. In this planting, we use a couple 4-footers for species that grow really fast and aren't preferred deer browse species like black locust and sycamore. And all of the tree tubes also have reusable zip ties, which is a total game changer, because if you ever need to remove the tube or check on the tree, you don't have to, create more plastic waste and replace the tree tubes. Craig touched on this. Maintenance is key. You really cannot grow a forest overnight. It will look like a field of plastic tubes for a couple years. And those tubes, they are very necessary, but they're not a perfect system. You can see in the top left, most of the tubes have a perforated seam, which are designed for some level of neglect. If the tree does get big enough, the perforated seam should split where the tree gets large. You could see that this one maybe needed a bit of extra help. That photo was taken during a volunteer event where a couple scouts and myself were out there removing tree tubes from an old planting at a school. This was not a Healthy Forest, Healthy Waters planting, but we were removing the tubes there. On the upper right, there's a photo of somebody seemed to have hit the tube with a mower, which pinched where the seedling would be growing, so you need to fix that. And then on the bottom right there, the tube is trying its best to get itself off of the tree. The tree is trying to shirk it off, but also on the tree, you can see that there is some invasive kind of vine growing around the tree, which has warped the growth of the tree. A lot of times birds will sit on the tops of the tree tubes, poop out some invasive seed and a nice little fertilizer package, and then that will create some competition for the little seedling trying to grow in there. So it's certainly not a perfect system. Here's some examples. Maintenance is key. You want to take a closer look. If you're just doing a drive-by survival check, you see green poking out the top of the tube, and you're like, this is great. This is Johnson grass coming out the top of the tube, and you might be able to see there's a nice little spotted lanternfly right there too. So Craig really stressed the importance of site prep. Johnson grass is a common enemy for all tree planters, and it's something that should definitely get a hold on before you plant the trees. Sorry for the weird aspect here, but this is a fallen tree tube. You see, oh, there's green coming out of it. Most of the green that you see is actually a non-native invasive shrub called multiflora rose. But when I looked a little closer, I could see that there was an oak in there trying its best. So I removed the tube, I cut the multiflora rose and tried to pull out the roots, and then I straightened it and replaced the stake. So it does need some TLC, some maintenance. Same with the bird net dilemma. We don't want birds falling in our tubes, especially if you're doing grassland conversion, where birds are used to hanging out. You'll have to remove that bird net. Thankfully, we plant a bunch of different species, some of which grow fast, some of which go slow. So you're not going to have to remove the bird nets all at once. But sometimes you don't catch it close enough and you do get that warped growth that Craig was talking about. So there are a lot of threats to our new forests. Here's a couple of them. People are the cause of a lot of these problems, but we also have to be part of the solution. We're the only things that can really help with this. The approach to hands-off land management is not really an option anymore, unfortunately. We have to be hands-on. So the fact that Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters is so flexible and customizable, it has the 3 years of contractor-provided maintenance, that's really wonderful, but it does take a lot of people to help plant this new forest and keep it going and keep it healthy. So a properly maintained site really speaks for itself. It's the best kind of advertising we could have for this kind of program, because if somebody sees their neighbor doing this and they have this really happy new forest, they're going to want that for their property too. Who can enroll? Here's a list of some current and past participants that we've had. We've done it with municipal governments, places of worship, businesses. I've done a couple like camps up here in Western Maryland, individual landowners, neighbors, HOAs. If you think that your site meets our eligibility requirements, or even if you just have a couple questions, please reach out to us. Once you do have a new forest, we don't leave you high and dry with the Maryland Forest Service. We and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, oh my gosh, sorry, Craig, and the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, they will help with follow-up maintenance as well. So even if you're outside of that 3-year maintenance plan, you can get a forest stewardship plan. A forester will basically take stock of your entire forest and give you recommendations on what is going well, what is not going well. That it could include newly planted forests through Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters, and existing forests that you have. Once you have that plan, you're eligible for a slew of forest stewardship programs, including some cost share programs and tax incentive programs, just to keep your forest healthy and keep your land in forest. Here in Maryland, we have a Maryland Forest Service office in each county and Baltimore City. You can go on the website at this QR code here, and you'll be brought to the webpage with all of the contact information for each county level office. We're a small but mighty agency. Up there is a photo of our staff. That's not everybody, but that is a good majority of us that work in the Maryland Forest Service. With the 5 Million Trees Initiative, we also have a team of employees working specifically to coordinate and support tree plantings in our assigned regions of Maryland. You can go on the 5 Million Trees website and find who your local contact is. Now, some of these will be changing, but we'll keep our website updated. If you reach out to any one of us here on this list, we can even point you in the right direction of who is the best person to get acquainted with. So in summary, 5 Million Trees is a really historic investment in tree planting projects. The state has seen how important it is. We're investing heavily in it. And we use a bunch of different programs, but again, Healthy Forests, Healthy Waters is one of our favorite programs to use. And it's just very customizable and flexible for Marylanders. And regionally assigned team members are here to help. Just a shameless plug here too. If you've planted a native tree since July of 2021, that could count towards the state's 5 Million Trees initiative. So if you go ahead and follow the QR code here in this slide, then that'll take you to the 5 Million Trees website. You can upload information about your tree and have your tree added toward the tally. Or if you just want to scan this and get to know a little bit more about the 5 Million Trees initiative and some of the resources, this will just take you to the 5 Million Trees website. And that's all I have for you today. This is my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Excellent. Thank you, Anna. Okay, and we are at 1:57, so we have just a couple minutes for questions. Anna and Craig, I don't know, are you available to stay on for like 5 extra minutes as well, just in case?
Yeah. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, so for the first question, someone was asking for contact information and also how to view the recording again. As far as contact info, Anna, you just shared yours. Gary, if you would be able to enable the chat, then I think Anna and Craig could both post their email addresses in the chat function. Currently, it's only available to the panelists, but if you can make it available to everyone, then we can post that. And then for the recording, for that one, it'll be up within the next couple weeks. Just check over at marylandforestryfoundation.org and look for the webinar section on the website. All of our past webinars will be available there. For a more fun question, we also have from Eric, who's asking, he's a college student, so he doesn't have any land of his own to reforest, but he would love to find a way to support reforesting projects. Do you have any recommendations for how to get involved, perhaps on a volunteer basis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Maryland Forest Service, Anna, you probably have some programs for volunteer planning and our mutual riparian rangers, which I think you guys are hosting. So I'll defer to you on that one.
Yes, we have a ton of different volunteer opportunities, depending on what neck of the woods you're in our state. So I do a lot here in Western Maryland, which is Frederick County West. I have counterparts across the state who will be able to connect you with volunteer opportunities. So we do tree tube removals on mature afforestation sites and try to get some of the plastic out of those new forests and help the growth of those new trees. That's kind of in line with the Riparian Rangers program that Craig mentioned. The Riparian Rangers program is hosted by the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, but you can tell that we like working together a lot, and we host a lot of their Riparian Rangers events on maturing healthy forest, healthy water sites. In addition, we do like community tree plantings. Here in Frederick County, I have a volunteer list with the Frederick County Forestry Board. And so if we have a volunteer tree planting coming up, I'll just send a request for volunteers out in there. I'll also work with, local scout groups. So it really depends what part of Maryland you're in. Another big focus that we have here in Maryland is native tree and shrub seed collections. Craig mentioned that we have our own state nursery here in Maryland. We're trying to get a lot of locally adapted seed from trees and shrubs that are growing here in our state. So, just last week, I worked with some volunteer groups. We got 80 pounds of serviceberry that we donated to the state nursery to so they could process the seed and start growing more service berry. Most of our seed collection is focused in the fall because that's when most of our trees and shrubs actually produce seed. But there's a lot of different ways to get involved. If you go on the Maryland Tree Mendus, that's tree-mendus website, there's a volunteer survey you can take, and it should shoot your contact information out to whoever is in your region.
Excellent. And I'll also make a couple quick notes. As a college student, there are some other programs through the Maryland Forestry Foundation that you may be interested in. Not even necessarily volunteer programs, but we do offer fellowships to support the education of folks who are interested in careers in the natural resources field. So if that is a pathway that you're on, again, please go over to the foundation website and check out the resources for students and see if any of those might align with your plans for the future. All right, he added a couple details. He's in Southern Maryland and lives in Charles County, but attends school at the University of Maryland College Park. So between the two, I'm sure that Anna will be able to connect you with ample volunteer opportunities. Folks are always looking for help out there. At this point, we don't have other questions from our audience members, but Gary, did you have questions for Anna and Craig that you wanted to make sure we have a chance to address?
Yes, thank you very much. And I want to thank both Anna and Craig for their presentations. I thought they were very informative and excellent. The very kind of thing that the Framing the Future program is all about, is helping people to better understand what the options are to help address the challenges they face, particularly on their own property as a forest landowner. One of the questions that continually we deal with in the foundation with this program is about survivability and whether or not, with this 3-year maintenance and the long-term commitment that landowners make in addition to that for the 15-year commitment, could you both talk briefly about how you assess survivability and whether or not this program, in your judgment, has a good record in survivability in terms of the long-lasting impact of the program itself?
Yeah, I mean, survivability, that's a key thing to any reforestation program. I'd say for the most part, we have high survival on pretty much all of our projects. And the key to that is the maintenance. You know, I've seen many projects in my career of these reforestation programs that didn't have maintenance, and there's a lot of failed plantings. You know, we definitely have had projects due to drought or whatever that has dropped, but I think the great part of this program is we have the opportunity to reinforce planting. So anything that drops below 80% survival, we can reinforce that to bring that up. So it's extremely helpful that we have Maryland Forest Service work on these projects, because it's nothing the Alliance or Maryland Forestry Foundation could do on our own. The fact that Maryland Forest Service is in every county and coordinating these projects, they can do these survival checks and let us know, and we just have to reinforce it the next planning window.
Thank you. Anna, did you want to add to that?
Craig did a great job of covering it. Our average survival rate here in Western Maryland is above 80%, which is pretty good. It's one of the reasons also we plant so dense, because we know that not every single tree is going to make it. If we thought every tree was going to make it, we might plant at 15 by 15 or 20 by 20. But we plant dense enough so that way we're planning for some amount of die off, but you're still going to have good canopy closure. And sometimes trees, if they're stressed out, they'll die back to the roots. And then you think that that tree is dead. The landowner calls me all worried. I come out and I see that there's sprouts coming back out from where the main stem might have died during that first growing year. That happened a lot this past year because we had such a severe drought last summer. But most of the battle is just getting the root systems for those seedlings established. So if I'm seeing resprouts, that's still a really good sign. And usually I'd like to wait a little bit before calling, ringing the alarm bells and ordering a replant, because sometimes the resprouts do happen. But yes, even with the terrible drought that we had last year, during my survival checks, which we typically do in the fall, we were still over 80% at a lot of our new plantings.
Thank you, Anna. Craig, let me ask you one last question as we conclude this program, and that is, as you look ahead, what did you see as the major challenges that face us in further implementation of the program? Obviously, from the standpoint of one who has worked on the program from the very beginning, your perspective would be very valuable. What you see lies ahead.
Yeah, of course. I think the number one challenge is going to be the capacity of our natural resources contractors. We've hit a point where we're planting so much now, and not only us, but other organizations are doing it. It's a limited number of contractors who actually do this work. A lot of landscapers out there, a lot of people who are planting large container trees. Someone who's doing reforestation, there's only a few out there, and so we've kind of hit capacity there on that, but also with maintenance as well. So we're actively trying to recruit and try out new maintenance contractors, someone to do the mowing, because typically they'll really need to be local, and people to do the spot spray herbicide. So we're trying to address that now, but it could be an issue if we can't get more.
Okay. Anna, do you have any comment about challenges you see in your area? Although you're the most heavily forested part of the state that you're working on, so I'm not sure how that question adds up.
Um, we do have challenges. I mean, we have a lot of threats to our existing forest and a lot of our natural regeneration to forests. So it is really exciting that we're able to have such direct control in what our new forests will look like. I mean, our deer overpopulation and a lot of our non-native invasive plants, pests, pathogens are a real big threat. So and climate change. So leaning into the fact that those things are threats and that they're happening and factoring that into the plans for our new forests has been really helpful.
Well, thank you. Again, I want to thank both of you for their presentations today, and I want to thank all of you who are signed in today for your attendance today. And we hope that this has been as informative for you as we intended it to be. Let me also add that we want to invite you back each month on the third Thursday at 1 o'clock to join us for future editions of Framing the Future. We have some exciting programs that lie ahead. And I'll mention that we're going to be talking about the beach blight disease in the future. We're going to be talking about renovation of sites in urban areas, kind of site by site. And in September, on the anniversary of our 5th year, we'll be having Dr. Doug Talmy talking about how to build a sustainable landscape 1 yard at a time. For those of you familiar with Dr. Talmy's work, we invite you to join us for that program. It should be an exciting opportunity to share an hour with him and his experience. We'll be talking more about that program in the months ahead between now and September. Again, I want to thank all of you and Megan for moderating this particular session, and I wish all of you a wonderful day today. Thank you very much for joining us. And that will conclude our program, friends. Bye bye.